Okay, great. So hi, everybody, and welcome to another Master Naturalist hoo-how. Kind of like I don't know, it seems like a little tea party here. So it's just great to meet with all of you and share some information. I'm doing a talk tonight on the Gypsy Moth, and I have a very personal relationship to Gypsy Moths, and I'll tell you about that during the slideshow. And if I'm going too fast or whatever, give me some cueing. All right, Christy? All right, so we're getting ready for gardening, and it's just like such an exciting time of year. But we also have to be aware that there are some negative things happening in the environment as well that maybe we should be very aware of. And where I'm talking about the topic of gypsy moths today, because this year's outbreak is expected to be as bad or as worse as last year. And we want to keep trees in our area as healthy and beautiful as possible, knowing that there's a direct relationship between the foliation of the trees in our area and the health of our watersheds. Trees prevent erosion, they provide habitat and shade to flora and fauna in the area. They prevent runoff, and so we think about trees as well the beauty that they are, but they're a vital part of the ecological health of the area as well. Now, what I want to do in this presentation is talk to you about gypsy moths as an invasive species, their life cycles, behaviors, natural factors that slow the spread, and then of course best practices for mitigating the damage they may cause this year. So how did they get here? This is a very interesting phenomenon because it was just a bunch of really bad decisions by people. And as invasive species go, that's usually the cause of the issue is our people. And in this case, it was a young man from France, and his name, he's right here, very handsome dude, Etienne Leopold Trouvelot. I don't think I can pronounce French very well, but there he is. And the interesting thing about this guy is that he was an amateur entomologist, but a professional artist and astronomer. So he combined those interests, and I threw up some of his artwork here because I thought it was pretty fabulous, because back in the day, obviously they weren't doing digital, artwork at all, and I just thought his work was pretty interesting. But at the very, I guess, bottom of the problem is that he and a friend of his came to the U.S. They wound up in a place called Medford, Massachusetts, and they had this great idea of actually creating a silk industry in the U.S. And the original silkworm from Asia, the Bombyx mori that I pictured here, is very susceptible to disease. And I know that because I was trying to raise them in my lab when I taught science. And it was really, really hard to keep them alive and bring them to Cornell to see what was going on with them. But they are very sensitive, but lovely, lovely larvae. They're beautiful, and they even feel silky to touch. Well, this guy, Etienne, he had this idea that if he bred them with the European gypsy moth, Lymantria dispar, he would wind up with a silk spinning larvae of the moth hybrid that would be less susceptible to diseases and hardier in our northeastern climate here in the US. But what happened is that, as insects usually do, they very much like to get outside and escape, and they escaped his home lab. So within weeks, within months, within years, the spread in Massachusetts was quite severe, and we're talking about like the late 1860s, 1870s now. And so it was already a problem way back then. His experiment was an epic failure. Right, like everybody would know that at this point. So it asks the question then, what do you do? If I just come over here, there's a little story that I had, and over on the left-hand side here, there's a picture of a girl. It's not me, but I tried to get a picture of the bike that I rode at that point in my life, and it was a really cool banana seed bike, and I was really proud of it. And I got this job from my brother. He was delivering papers, and we grew up in Bayonne, New Jersey, which is across the bay from Manhattan. And he was so kind to give me a paper route on the most Gypsy Moth infested street in Bayonne, New Jersey. And I didn't know that at the time, but what I saw were these guys. So I'm bicycling down the street, and all I could see are these horrible, horrible things hanging from the trees and dropping into my hair, under my wheels, in the papers, all over the place, squish, squish, squish. It was horrifying. And I went home and I asked him about it. He goes, yeah, I thought I would give you that route because you like nature. Go figure, right? Well, we're not talking about a really cute species here, right? We're talking about somebody who's a little bit more menacing. And the thing is about the gypsy moth is that they're very aptly named because Lymantria means destroyer, and dispar means unequal size between the sexes, as we will see later in terms of some pictures I'll show you. Now, another story I have is that during college, I took a job in Dingman's Ferry, Pennsylvania. So this is about, saying 1977. Some of you youngsters may not appreciate, you probably before you were born. But anyway, this is a viewpoint of what, the Pennsylvania Allegheny Front looked like in July 2007. So, speed future. But you could see the vast defoliation. And where you see this really spring green area, that's where the trees are starting to refoliate after the first major defoliation. I mean, the gypsy moth can defoliate 700,000 miles of acreage in, just a few months in a bad outbreak. The map here is showing the, what year is this? Okay, this is a 2020 map showing basically 19 states infested, but there's actually upwards of 21 at this point in time. So that would include Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then getting into North Carolina. So the spread is real, and it's just keeps on marching right along. So the gypsy moth life cycle, as everybody knows, they have complete metamorphosis. And the interesting thing about them is that they spend so much of their time from late August through September, all through the winter time, and then, into like the early May in their egg stage. So they're able to overwinter quite successfully. And, we'll talk about why. They have this egg mass that is very, very well insulated because it is covered with hairs and scales from the female's abdomen when she's laying the eggs. And if you really look at them, I've looked at them under my microscope, really fantastic insulation. So, besides that loft, that sponginess, these eggs are really, really nestled tight, and they probably have a high content of sugar too to prevent the freezing. But at any rate, it really takes low temperatures. Like I'm thinking, deep freezes, like below zero, below 20 degrees for several months to really kill them. In winters like we have, it's no problem. Oh, so then, again, their larvae stage is from May through June. They start to pupate at the end of June into early July. And then by late July, August is when we're seeing these, adults emerge. I know that last summer, it was almost magical in a way, if you thought about it positively, like all these male, moths just trying to seek out the females. But at any rate, it wasn't so magical after all. They have 4 phases of their population booms or busts, and they do follow natural cycles. So this is not unheard of that we're going through a bad cycle. It's going to decline, and then it'll start over again 8 to 10 years. But what we have is something called the innocuous phase. That's characterized by very low population. It could continue for several years, and it might be difficult to find them. And again, they're easy to control because if you see one, you can, squish it or, dispose of it somehow. But then after a few years, you get to the release phase. And this is when the population density increases many times over. And then, anyway, so just real quick going through this again, these are the typical population phases, not related to their molting or anything like that, but basically what we see. Once again, innocuous is when we hardly see any of them around, and they're really well taken care of by natural predation, either, invertebrate, vertebrate, what have you. The release phase is when they start picking up many times over, but they still don't cause complete defoliation of trees at all, and they're controlled. However, during the outbreak phase, this is what we saw last summer, and this is what we're going to see again this summer. And the outbreak phase is when the trees can go through 2, even 3 defoliations. And it's quite severe, and that's when we have to really pay attention and hopefully do some preventative work. The decline phase comes from basically they run out of food, and now it's time that their natural viruses, bacteria, fungi have caught up with them, and they will crash. Their population will crash naturally, and that cycle is like 8 to 10 years. It seems like that's been going on. So it's not unheard of that we have these cycles with the gypsy moth. It just feels very awful right now. Let me go back to where I might have been. Okay, let's go on here. Let's see. Okay, so when do they hatch out? Late April to mid-May. Now, again, it's late April now. I live in Honeoye Falls, south of Rochester. I'm not seeing any, but we have had some chilly weather, but this week it's supposed to be much warmer. We'll see what happens. When they hatch out, they're very interesting because they're tan. They're almost 1/4 inch long, and then within 4 hours, they turn black. Now, not that they're real cute or anything like that. I would just point that out. Now, in this slide, you can see these little pin prick holes there. All right, some of them may be from hatch out, but others may be from one of the predatory wasps that feeds on the eggs. And we'll see that little guy later. So the gypsy moth has instars. They have between 5 and 6, depending on the sex. The males have 5 molts and the females have 6. And the 6th one is really to provide enough energy for them for egg laying. The males are different from the females from the get-go because they only grow up to about 2 inches, and the females can get humongous at 3 inches. And I was marveling at this last summer because I just thought that they were all the same, but then again, you learn and you share. So if you have a really big gypsy moth larvae, it's probably a female. All right, now a lot of people confuse the gypsy moth with the eastern tent caterpillar. And you can see with the gypsy moth, it has, it's very hairy, and it's got, these bristle-like projections. And inside the bristle-like projections, you have what are called eukaryoting hairs, and those hairs contain histones, which can cause allergy reactions. Now, I've had them crawl on me. I'm not allergic to a whole lot in my life, but some people may be. And I would suggest that you not have kids handle them because they can cause a rash, itchy, that kind of thing. Might need some Benadryl. But anyway, they have 5 pairs of these blue protuberances and then 6 pairs of red on their dorsal surface. And the eastern tent caterpillar has this line of white going all the way down the dorsal surface and these really pretty sky blue dots along the ventral sides. Now, they have different behaviors as well, though, so we could talk about that as well. The eastern tent caterpillar feeds during the day, and I'm sorry, I'm talking about the forest tent caterpillar. That's the one that eats during the day. And the forest tent caterpillar actually has dots down the back that look like footprints. They're kind of cream color. I didn't include a slide of that. The eastern tent caterpillar, the one that's shown, feeds at night. and then it goes back to the nests during the day. So those nests can be all over the tree, whereas with the forest tent caterpillar, those nests are at the end of the branches. So that's a difference too. Gypsy moth doesn't make those, those nests in the trees like the tent caterpillar does. All right, so getting back to the life cycle of the gypsy moth, the pupation, that's going to be happening in late June to early July, and they transform into a moth within 10 to 14 days. Now it's interesting because they will spin a web of silk around them to attach themselves to the substrate they're on, or they could be hanging, from, a tree, bottom of a leaf, whatever. They're not too picky, but you will see this really fine thready material around them. It's fascinating. All right, when the adults come out, it's interesting because the males come out first. The males are smaller than the females, and they are browner, and they've got these really cool antennae. They're very large antennae, and they're very finely serrated. And of course, the idea there is to basically tell the moth when they have predatory bats coming. These antennae also pick up on the fluttering of the female's wings when the females emerge. They also have a tympanal organ, for hearing, so they can hear the wing beats of the females. And the females over here, they're quite larger than the males, and they have a fuzzy top, white cream fuzz. And they also, if you could open up the wings there, she would have a very fuzzy white abdomen as well. Now she is not going to be able to fly. They don't fly, but they do flap their wings especially when they come out of the pupae. Here you can see them two together in the middle. See that sexual dimorphism. So going back to the statement, I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, but we do have the Asiatic gypsy moth here as well. It's another invasive. They're far larger, both male and female. The females can fly, and they're quite more destructive. But I think that's another slideshow. All right, egg laying. Wow, we've seen this. They're amazing egg layers, and these eggs are upwards of 1,000 eggs in a mass. Quite a wow, what successful reproduction they have. Now the females do not, they don't go far from where they exit the pupa, and they're going to be mating and then egg laying very, very close by. Look at them all. You can see them as soon as they, lay their eggs, they die. The females and the males only live between 6 and 10 days. Both the male and female, by the way, they don't have working digestive systems, so they don't eat. It's just the way it is. Now, it's interesting because normally the males are nocturnal, and that's another difference between them and the tent caterpillar, right? But the males are nocturnal, except during a bad outbreak. You're going to see them fly all around during the day as well. They're crazy going after those females. So what about these eggs? And that's where we come in as human beings. We're spreading the gypsy moth. They can be laid anywhere on garden furniture or decorative pots, picnic tables, furniture, under wheels and parts of cars. And that's really how they're getting from state to state, is through transportation means. So it's really important if you're going to be transporting things in your trailer or truck to check first for gypsy moth egg cases and scrape them off before embarking on your trip. All right, they're very successful. Of course, they're insects, but gypsy moths especially, because not only do they lay a lot of eggs, gosh, it depends on the health of the female, but again, I've read they can lay between 500 and 1,200 eggs per egg sac, again, depending on how robust the female is. But those eggs are perfectly timed to hatch out at bud burst of their favored tree species. Wow, so it's, yeah, that's why we have such bad outbreaks when it's time. But they also have a lot of host species. It's not just one or two trees. They go after a whole bunch of different kinds of trees. I'm going to get back to this in just a second. Let's take a look at these trees. These are their favorite tree species. Of course, there's oak. And I mentioned my time in Digman's Ferry. Typically, oak was the major tree species in that area. Gosh, it looked like a desert when I was there, and you could actually hear and see all these droppings. Called frass, by the way. Frass is a special word for gypsy moth scat. Anyway, look at this list of trees. It's crazy, but they're not picky, and they will go after conifers. Especially when their food gets low. The problem, of course, with going after conifers is that with defoliation, conifers are not going to respond well again. They can't regroup like deciduous trees can. So whereas a deciduous tree might defoliate 2 times, even 3 times and still recover, of course, they'll be stressed if they have to do that. Our poor conifers won't be able to do that. So here's a listing of their least favorite tree species. So, that whole thing about, well, just plant the ones that they don't like. That's all and good if you have a new development or something like that. But, if you already have a woodlot or planted landscape grounds, that's maybe not an option. But here are some ones that they'll eat if they're really hungry, but they're not going to go for them first. All right, so I just want to go back down here. All right, so environmental factors. This is your typical ecology, right? So these are factors that will have an influence on gypsy moth populations. Temperature, really cold, bitter cold. I mean, we're talking about -10, -20 degrees. That can do a damage to the egg masses. Otherwise, they're perfectly fine. They're really, really well insulated. I might have said before that the egg mass, that soft, spongy buff color, it's loaded with hairs from the female's abdomen and the scales from her body. So when she's laying that egg, she's also laying, all that insulation around them. Temperature also has a factor in what the hatch out's going to be, if it's going to be late in the spring or early. Now, moisture is something that we don't normally consider, but moisture is important because there's a species of fungus that really does some damage to the gypsy moths. And without moisture, those spores are not going to be able to reproduce, and get to their target. Now, the wind's an issue. You can see in that early slide, and poor Maureen bicycling down, on that bike and delivering newspapers. Well, they can hang on these silks, right? And then the wind blows them, and that's one way that they can get around, and hence the name gypsy moth. But also a wind event can blow them long ways away. So that's probably not in our favor. It's probably more in their favor. Now, resource availability, of course, is going to be their food, right? Because they're getting both, nutrient and water from the food they live on, the leaves. Predator density. Is the fungus there? Are viruses there that kill them? Are the bacteria there that kill them? Are the invertebrates and the vertebrate predators there that kill them? That's an issue. And of course, sexual competition. I don't really think the gypsy moth has a really problem with the sex part of their lives, but I don't know. Maybe that decline phase. Yeah, the decline phase. All right, so we're going to go and pick up right here. So on pathogens, these are the natural factors. This bacteria, Streptococcus falcalis, and Pseudomonas species, they will really do a great thing because they infect the larvae and they make them shrink. So that's how they kill them from the inside out. The virus is also awesome because this is a good virus. And it kills them, and how you could tell is that they're shaped like an inverted V. Yeah, and I've seen them on my trees. I didn't know what it was until I researched it, and I'm like, wow, that's really phenomenal. But why it's an inverted V, I don't know. But that's a good virus, not like COVID, and we need more of it, lots more of it. And what else kills them? This fungus, entomophaga, myga. This one was introduced from Japan because, again, it took care of them over in Asia, and so it was introduced as a possible predatory aspect here in America. Here, the larvae appear shriveled and brittle, and I know I told you not to touch them, but I touched them, and they are really brittle. They're just like a crispy shell, but good, they're dead. That's what we want. Now, predators, this is a fascinating thing. I told you about these little predatory wasps, right? And so they try to get in there, and the research says that they're only 30% effective at wiping out an egg mass, but that's because they're so teensy. They can only get through the first layer of eggs, before they, haul out, go away from the egg mass. So they pierce the eggs, they feed on the eggs, and then leave. Now, there are larger wasps also, and they lay their eggs inside the larvae. Pretty good strategy. And then there's this really large ground beetle. Now, I found ground beetles on my property last summer. They were fabulous. I don't think they were these guys. These were imported from Europe to help with the gypsy moth. Look at that iridescence. Now, the ones I saw in my yard were pretty black. But now I'm like, they're kind of cool, but they're very, very large. They're about, I'm saying about at least 2 inches long. They look ferocious, but we really love them because they take care of the gypsy moth larvae. And then, of course, there's flies and spiders and ants as well. Now, I remember many, many years ago, someone said, not even the birds will eat them. They're too hairy. They're disgusting. Well, birds have adapted pretty well, especially to the younger larvae that aren't so noxious. Now, regardless of density, right? Whether they're, it's bad outbreak or whatever, these guys here will eat the younger ones, right? And that's quite a good list. I think we're heading in the right direction. And at high gypsy moth density, anything will eat them. These guys go after. They don't really care about the size. They'll eat them. So like them or not, starlings, grackles, cowbirds, right? You'll want to keep those out of your feeders, but they're really, really good for gypsy moth consumption. So hallelujah. Then mammals, mice, chipmunks, squirrels, raccoons, shrews, they will also eat the larvae. So what can we do as homeowners? Obviously, we're not going to eat them. Gross. Anyway, but egg mass scraping, we can still do that. If you see them on your trees, you can scrape them really carefully. Basically, I use a plastic knife and, a yogurt container, large one, right? But try not to get the eggs on the ground because they can hatch and they'll crawl right back up the tree. And then you want to put them in soapy water and then leave them there for at least 48 hours, 48 to 72 hours. You could also put them in alcohol or bleach, but, again, then you've got the issue of what to do with them in the environment. With putting them in the soap, you could basically kill them and dig a hole and whatever, or put them in the trash. I've been experimenting with the vegetable oil spray. I think it's been really effective, but you could also use insecticidal soap with that. I'll talk about the spray in just a bit. Sticky barriers, BTK, that's a spray on bacteria that really harms the young ones. Burlap barrier traps, mating disruptors, sampling protocols, and then of course to plant less favored trees. I guess that would be, if you're starting from scratch and picking out a tree, you might as well pick one that the gypsy moths don't like. So this is what egg scraping looks like. I know that in certain municipalities, citizen science is in full force with Boy Scouts, people getting people into parks to do egg scraping activities. This guy is really smart. He's wearing glasses as well because, again, those hairs can be very irritating to your eyes if they get in your eyes. Notice also that he's wearing gloves. Not a bad idea, especially with kids. This is the oil technique. This is me. I'm just spraying some of that oil. I'm using one of those big sprayers that can add pressure. And what's amazing is that you can spray it and get all the way up on those undersides of branches, way up where you can't reach, right, for the egg scraping. So I like it. It really works very, very well. So I was doing that, I don't know, it was probably back in November or so. I just wanted to see what the egg masses would look like. They're just about dissolved. They're like over the winter, they just got rid of them. But the idea, of course, is to coat them so they don't get oxygen and the eggs die. So you can use a larger, little spray bottle. We got the big BJ style quantity of oil. And I know research will tell you soybean oil, but basic vegetable oil is usually about 95% soybean oil. So it'll work. This is the sticky band technique. And here, this is for the earlier instars, late April to early May. So get ready for this one, guys. You take duct tape and you wrap it around your tree. If it's a really young tree, though, you probably should put up like a craft paper, that brown paper first, because that bark is very sensitive. But if it's a mature tree, you could wrap it in duct tape, push in the crevices as much as you can so the caterpillars can't get underneath. And then you could either put a product called Tanglefoot in the middle of the strip. People use Vaseline, or I do something where I wrap around the tree with duct tape and then twist the duct tape and then wrap the sticky side out in the middle. And it works great because what the larvae are doing is that they're heading up the tree. Remember, they have an instinct to head towards the light when they're young. And they either get stuck on it or they just like want to avoid it. But they'll all be grouped together and you can pick them off really easily. So again, that's a technique for earlier in the instar life of the gypsy moth caterpillar. So BT, what is it? It's a Bacillus thuringiensis, and it is this particular strain, the Krystaki, is great for gypsy moth caterpillars. So it is a bacterium, and to kill them, though, the caterpillars have to be fairly small. Once they grow larger than, say, a ½ inch, they pretty much are not affected by it. So you could buy it at a garden store. These are some examples. Dipel 4A thuricide, but it really does a nice job killing them. I haven't tried it on my property. I don't know. I was trying the other methods first before I would go that route, but it's a possibility. Chemical pesticides, we really, really want to avoid them at all costs because we have so many beneficials around, of course, the honeybees and pollinators, but also the predators, right, that are going to be doing a really nice number on the gypsy moth caterpillars. So we don't want to harm them and use the chemical pesticides if possible. Now, I know they're spraying. The spraying might even be like pheromone disruptors, but we'll talk about that in just a bit. So later on, when those caterpillars are larger, now what do? Their behavior changes. The gypsy moth caterpillar is now during the evening going down the tree and wants to protect itself either in the grooves of bark or under rocks or bricks or whatever. You're going to find them all over the place, but lower in the tree and around the tree. And in the morning, what they do is they head up again. They head on up the tree. So if you tie a band of burlap, about 18 to 24-inch band of burlap, and then tie twine around the middle of it and make a skirt that goes, over the twine. The caterpillars on their way up are going to be caught in it. They're looking for something to hide in anyway. They seek out enclosed spaces for protection. And then you can just lift them up and pick them off and put them in your soapy water. So that's pretty effective when they're bigger. All right, this is the mating disruptor phenomenon. What it does is that it masks the female pheromone and it totally confuses the males. Now you have to apply it before the emergence of the adults, obviously, because you want it in the air so that the males and the females can't get together. And it's not suitable for really high density populations. So and again, I'm just going to make a guess. It's not scientific, but in a really, really bad outbreak, I would imagine that they're spraying something like BT as opposed to a mating disruptor like this one. But it is pretty effective with low populations of gypsy moths. Oh, so the way it works, I just threw that slide up there. It's really cool though, because what they do is they put the chemical in basically a carrier, and then it's slowly emitted over time. And it's kind of clever. So this will be dispersed, by helicopter, perhaps. It could also be dispersed, with other sprays. So sampling, what is that all about? Many of you may be have done the DEC population protocol for gypsy moths. It's really very elegant. Boy, I mean, the copies I have are from like 2005, so it's been around for quite a while. But the DEC 2020 webinar and also the Finger Lake Prisms 2021 webinar, they do a great job of explaining how to do it step by step, and then you can send your results into DEC, for them to populate and then make predictions about the following year. And that's why I'm doing this presentation, because the results from last year's sampling were indicating that this year would be a really bad outbreak year again. So thank you, and hopefully everybody was able to hear this time. I totally apologize, for the technological snafu. It's crazy. So anyway, but I'm really happy to answer questions or share horror stories with gypsy moths if anybody wants to or has time to.
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you very much for going through that again for us. We appreciate it very much. There was a question. Is it possible eggs also cause allergies, as I tried to scrape some off and had an allergic reaction with itchy eyes and swelling around my eyes?
Definitely, and it's not the egg per se, which are pretty slick, but it's the hairs that they're engulfed in. So when the gypsy moth female is laying them, she is encapsulating them with her abdomen hairs and the scales from her body. And that's what's creating that fluffy, hairy egg mass. And those hairs are also allergy causing. So yes, you can get a reaction from handling the eggs, definitely. But if you isolate the eggs from the hair, I mean, I've looked at them under my microscope. They're pretty, boy, they're almost glassy. So I guess if you did a nice wash or something, I doubt that they would cause a reaction, but I definitely know it's the hairs that, if you're handling the whole mass, you can get a reaction.
Okay, thank you. Adrian asks, can you repeat how much an adult can defoliate an area and in what amount of time it takes to do so?
Oh yeah, there is a blurb on that, but let me just think, because I'm not sure I covered that factoid.
You had mentioned it right at the beginning of the program.
Right at the beginning. Okay, let me take a look at my notes here.
Oh, yeah, when you had the picture of the big defoliated area in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Charm. Yeah, I'd have to get back with the exact. I don't want to say anything that's not accurate, but there is definitely material that talks about that phenomenon of how much they can eat. It's pretty impressive, actually. But I'd have to get back. But I'll send an email to Christy, and hopefully you can send that out.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thank you. Selma asks, where does the name Gypsy Moth come from?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So there's two. I'm going to bring up the slide again. But the genus name has to do with this. It means destroyer, and dispar, Lymantria means destroyer, and dispar means horrible. Let me see if I have that here. Yeah, and then of course the gypsy part comes from the fact that they can hang on silk strings and then the wind blows them and they can just go from place to place to place to place. And so that's where the common name gypsy moth comes from. But yeah, the genus and species name directly relate to basically their ferocious eating habits. And it's a very negative name.
Okay, thank you. Marla asks, does the BTK biological pesticide kill other species of caterpillars, or is it gypsy moth specific?
There's one BT that is gypsy moth specific, but in general, it's supposed to not affect. Yes, it will kill caterpillars, but it doesn't affect all insects. So it's probably the lesser of the evil of using pesticides.
But it kills our native caterpillars?
It kills some of them, yeah, but not all.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Paul asks, do tent caterpillars also have cyclical outbreaks? Are they as bad as gypsy moth outbreaks?
You know, that's something that, again, I can't say exactly what that cycle looks like with the eastern tent caterpillar, but they do. They cycle the same way. Again, with the virus and fungus, bacterial, I'm not sure if they're going to be affected by the same species, but again, in nature, they do have their predators. They do have their natural predation from different viruses, bacteria, fungus. But I don't know if it's going to be quite the same 8 to 10 years that I found with the gypsy moths. I just remember as a runner going through forest pathways and just being amazed some years at the amount of tent caterpillars, and then other years not. So that's the only thing I'm basing my response on.
Okay, thank you. Gail asks, how was it determined that this was going to be another bad year for the moths?
Oh, okay. That was from people sending in information to the DEC protocol for the egg mass sampling. And basically the way the sampling works is that you go out to a section of forest. It's not really effective if you're in like an urban park where trees are really widely separated, but in a natural woodlot or forest setting. And basically it's measured in a small area and you basically count the number of egg masses in that area. And if you go on the DEC website, they have a webinar for 2020, and the PRISM webinar is 2021. It really goes through the stages of the protocol. But you just, again, it's just counting. And you lay on the ground and you hopefully cover your mouth if anything's going on with droppings, but if in the environment. But basically it's something that you would do in the fall through winter through early spring. And then that determines what things are going to be looking like for the summertime. Does that answer the question?